Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's brief ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Both videos today I started off with the drought monitor, and I want to show you again where we ended up here with the July 15th update. The drought across the west is quite extensive, and that of course builds into the northern plains and upper Midwest of the United States. If we just take a couple of different ways to look at this, I'm going to come up here and just look at the change maps, and let's just look at how the last month has really shaped up in terms of the drought monitor class change. There's been up to a 3-class degradation here on this side of the Red River Valley in parts of Minnesota, and there are pockets in South Dakota that need a lot more rainfall. We've continued to get drier and drier in parts of Montana as well as Idaho and pockets in the Pacific Northwest as well. Improvement in parts of the southern high plains here, and then getting into this part of Wisconsin and Michigan. Just a couple of places to take note of here overall over the last month. Now, to show you the extent of the western drought, I just pulled up a time series here of drought area. That's what's shown on the y-axis, and it's just important to point out that looking at severe and to extreme drought in the west, we're at the highest or greatest extent of land coverage since the inception of the drought monitor, which began back in the year 2000. And so we're going to watch to see how this continues to evolve with time here, but when you look at it overall, you've right now got something on the order of 83% of the west in severe to exceptional drought. Just incredible to see that. From there, let's take a look at some live satellite data, and if we just kind of rock this back and show throughout much of the day today, you can see the extent of the smoke. It was prolific yesterday coming out of parts of Oregon. We can still see the smoke and the wildfires in Washington and also into parts of British Columbia. But a lot of cloud cover here, and then the smoke on the downstream side. See all this? A lot of storms here blowing up on the open ocean open moisture transport, from the ocean, and the stalled out boundary in this area, and some scattered storms that are running over the ridge. We're going to come back to that in just a few moments. But quickly on that smoke, this is the forecast here through the next 48 hours or so. There it goes. It just started over again. So we can see the extent of that wildfire smoke moving across much of this part of North America. Speaking of North America, let's blow it out and look at the last 30 days of precipitation anomalies. It is quite clear that we've had a very wet corridor right in through this area. The cause for that has been the Bermuda high here, pumping the moisture around and into that boundary, and then higher atmospheric pressure also coming out of Canada, coming around like that. You stall out a boundary here in some places from parts of the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas, really the Oklahoma panhandle, straight through like almost to Kansas City here, and then over to St. Louis and on up to lower Michigan and into the Northeast. That's an area that there are some places that are over a foot in excess of rainfall. And one of the things I was interested to see here is how in this area over the last month, we have a deficit in cumulative downward solar flux. So again, a good friend of mine last night, his name's Drew, was kind of talking about how through much of pollination here in the state of Illinois, the beginning of it, we've just had a lot of cloud cover. And as a result, you can see it here. And just to prove, Drew, yeah, it's there and it's shown up in the data. Much more sunnier to the southeast and back into the Canadian Prairie and upper Midwest, and of course the Pacific Northwest. So very interesting to see that shaping up. Now, over the last 72 hours, we have brought some heavier rainfall into parts of the Mid-South and the lower Mississippi River Valley, and the boundary, the stalled out boundary here over the weekend that brought in the heavy rains, is now tucked all the way down here along the Gulf Coast, and that's where it's going to continue to be wet. But we'll talk about the strength of the southwest monsoon and also the ridge riding storms over the top of it, because you can see already today where they've gone through. And our flow pattern right now, well, that main boundary is sitting here, okay, fed around the Bermuda high, pumping the moisture in, but you can see the flow is something like that in the low levels of the atmosphere. Got a couple of tropical systems, Guillermo here and Felicia, but they're both moving away from the United States and aren't necessarily going to impact the pattern. And over here in the Atlantic, nothing going on right now. And we'll see that again in the hurricane update in just a few moments. So let's blow this up and take a closer look at our high-res NAM model. Now, I'm all the way at the end of this. I'm going to step you back, and you can almost see it pretty neatly going in reverse as to what this pattern is going to do. You see the circulation today into this evening around that boundary? Kind of neat to see that. So a lot of scattered storms capable of putting down heavy rainfall here. You'll then see running around the southwestern monsoon, you'll notice it here, little pieces of this putting these short waves through the flow into Idaho and Montana, and they curl around the Canadian Prairie, and then what happens is they come diving back into this area. That's that northwest flow we're going to keep talking about. See it there into Wednesday? Yeah, that's the pattern that we really need to see set up, because over the next several days, this is what the jet stream level winds are going to look like. That's what's color coded here. You see there's a trough earlier in the week that's set up here. The flow comes over the ridge there, which is anchored from the Four Corner states into parts of the southern Canadian prairie, and the storms cascade over the top of that. They just follow with these little short waves that run over the top, or they're met with waves that come off of the Pacific Ocean, waves in the flow of the atmosphere, that then move through the Canadian prairie and excite, again, a little frontal boundary or just something to initiate storms that then dive into the upper Midwest. But as I let this play on out and we just get out here to next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the jet stream is north. It stays in that configuration with the ridge anchored somewhere here in the Central Plains back to the Four Corners, and that's why we see that over the next week our precipitation pattern is dominated by those factors. Stalled out boundary today, fed on Gulf moisture, stronger southwestern monsoon, sending small waves in the jet stream level flow around the ridge through the northern Rockies, met with the jet stream level flow coming through Canada, that cascades down just like this, opening up a corridor of thunderstorms that then pulls into the northeast. If you're in between it, in here, that is the area that shows up dry. In other words, just isolated storms. And I'll show you what the precipitation pattern is going to do there in a few moments. Now, that's your next week. Let's now get out there beyond that. I've taken out here in the GFS ensemble out to next Wednesday. And we continue to see that that ridge has opened up and moved east, and the flow is still going around it like this. So the dominant pattern we're going to get out of this is going to be ridge riders. And if we just kind of shrink this up so we can see it, you notice that the flow comes around like this, and that is where we have the greatest risk of thunderstorms. We're drier under the ridge. We're drier along the coast. Now, this is partly because scattered storms on the daily inflow of moisture will be there, but no big organized systems coming into the southeastern or Gulf Coast of the United States. And that is why we also say that there's not much tropical activity. I'll come back to that in a few moments. But the European models bought into the same thing. This is week 2. That's where the wetter conditions are. The ridge will likely move here, and you'll get some scattered storms over the southeast, but that's about it. To the north of it, we could still see more scattered storms coming through the Canadian prairie as well. And if I stitch it all together, I like the European ensemble solution here for looking at the probability of getting an inch of rain over the next 15 days. Now pause it and take a closer look at this, because each of the pieces I just described is represented in this particular graphic. Again, the color bar representing the probability. That's a key graphic at the middle part of my forecast video today. Quick update on the tropics. National Hurricane Center says nothing really happening over the next 5 days. There's no organized convection in this area that we're watching. And on top of that, a big plume of Saharan dust has moved across the Atlantic, so there's some pretty dry and dusty air in there. But as we discussed in the more extended video, while the MJO right now is over in phase time, just north of Australia and Indonesia, it is forecast to come back over toward Africa. And the net effect of that is to increase rising motion here as we enter the month of August, which means while July has had a lull in hurricane activity, I'm going to be watching the main development region, the Caribbean even, and the Gulf. And by the way, we'll also see more tropical systems coming off of possibly the Eastern Pacific as well. Now, to get into temperatures, this is how we've seen the temperature pattern shape up over the last month. Record setting in the western part of the United States and cooler on the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. Well, where's the heat building? Well, we can see today, this afternoon, we got triple-digit heat in the northern plains getting back into Montana. That's, in fact, the hottest place in the country right now, shaping up here, at least outside of the the desert down here, the Mojave Desert. Very, very hot in parts of Montana. And over the next 5 days, that heat slowly expands into the western Corn Belt. Well, by Friday, we could be getting our temperatures in here in the upper 90s, possibly even cracking 100 in South Dakota. From there, though, day 5 through 10, as the ridge opens, notice how the heat goes with it. And while you got cooler weather here, that's all driven by the southwestern monsoon. Now, in my extended video, we get into some detail about the reliability of the European weeklies, but I'd like to show you the updated forecast as we get out there during the month of August. With an open Gulf, what we end up having here is the model having to do something with that precipitation, with that moisture, so it precipitates it out, and that's a continuation of the pattern we've been seeing. So this is what we've got in terms of precip for August, and this is what we've got in terms of temperatures. And that is certainly just, again, an extension here of what we saw throughout much of the month of June and July. So persistence seems to dominate until we start to get some bigger factor to push the pattern away from where it is. The last thing I want to encourage you to do is, if you watch that extended analysis, I got some more information here from the NMME talking about Nino region 3.4 in the Central Pacific, agreeing with the European as to bringing in a moderate La Nina late this fall and into winter. And as we see those ocean temperatures cool up, we need to discuss what that means for harvest here, which we did in the extended video, the start of the growing season in South America, and where our best rising motion could possibly be going into fall and early winter for the Northern Hemisphere. So I covered that at the end of the extended video, so if you want to take a look at it, check it out. But I'll wrap this one up here, and I'll thank you for your attention, and I'll also talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.